All right, let's talk about one of the biggest, most fundamental questions in all of economics. What is the government's job when it comes to the economy? Should it just sit back and let things happen, or should it be in there running the entire show? This is it, right? This is the core question, and it's at the heart of just about every major debate in politics and economics. The thing is, there are no simple answers here, because what you think is the right answer really depends on your philosophy of how the world ought to work. So let's get into it. So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start with why this is such a huge debate in the first place. Then we'll look at three major competing ideas. And after that, we'll dive into the three big practical roles governments play. That's the allocative, distributive, and stabilization roles. And finally, we'll wrap it all up with the modern balancing act that every single country is dealing with right now.
So seriously, why can't we all just agree on this stuff? Well, it's because this isn't just a simple math problem. It's about deeply held and often totally conflicting beliefs about what's more important: freedom, fairness, or pure efficiency. And that right there is the key. You can tell a lot about a government's core beliefs just by looking at its economic policies. They're a direct reflection of a deeper ideology. So to really get a handle on the different approaches, you first have to understand the different schools of thought behind them. So let's jump right into the three big ideas that have really defined this entire debate for centuries. We're talking about the classical view, the Marxist view, and the Keynesian view. Each one offers a completely different blueprint for what the government should or shouldn't be doing. This table just lays out the battle lines so perfectly. On one extreme, you've got the classical view. The private sector is the hero, and the government's job is just to get out of the way. Then, on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, you have the Marxist view, which basically says the private sector is the villain and the government needs to control everything to protect people. And then, kind of sitting in the middle, is the Keynesian view. It sees the government more like a guardian. You let the market do its thing when times are good, but you expect the government to step in and save the day when things go wrong. This quote, it perfectly captures that classical or laissez-faire idea. The thinking here is that a free, unregulated market is the absolute best way to use resources. And anytime the government gets involved, it just messes things up. Now, the Marxist argument is built on a specific chain of logic called the labor theory of value. It starts with the idea that all real economic value comes from labor, from people actually doing work. So when a company owner makes a profit, that profit is considered surplus value that was, in this view, effectively stolen from the workers. And if you follow that logic, the conclusion is pretty stark. The whole system is unfair and needs to be replaced by total government control. Okay, so you have these pure, powerful ideologies, but what's happening in the real world? Well, the reality is a lot more mixed. Pretty much every country today has a mixed economy. So the real debate isn't if the government should be involved, it's how and how much. So let's look at the three main jobs governments actually do in these modern systems. First up, we have the allocative role. A really great way to think about this is to picture the government as the economy's traffic cop. It's not driving the cars, but it's trying to make sure traffic, or in this case resources, flows smoothly and efficiently to where it's most needed. So its main job here is to step in and correct for things that the free market, left to its own devices, might not handle so well. It's all about nudging resources to create the right combination of goods and services for society as a whole. And you can see what that means right here. The government provides public goods. Think things like national defense or roads that a private company just wouldn't build because they couldn't make a profit from them. It also steps in to break up monopolies to keep prices competitive. It manages what economists call externalities. So it taxes negative things like pollution, but it might subsidize positive things like clean energy research. And finally, it tries to correct for asymmetric information. That's a fancy way of saying it protects you when one person knows way more than the other, like a used car dealer knowing a car is a lemon. All right, next up, the distributive role. Now, if the allocative role was all about efficiency, this one is all about fairness. In this role, the government tries to act as a kind of social equalizer, working to make sure everyone has a fair shot at success. The market is an incredible engine for creating wealth, but it doesn't always distribute that wealth in a way that feels just or fair to everybody. So the goal here is to make the whole system more inclusive. But this is also where things get tricky, because policies designed to make things more fair can sometimes slow down pure economic efficiency. It's a really tough trade-off. So how do they do this? Well, through things like progressive taxation, where people with higher incomes pay a larger percentage. That money then helps fund public services.
Governments also create social safety nets, think unemployment benefits or pensions, to catch people when they fall on hard times. They might set price caps on essential goods, support small businesses, and, this is a huge one, invest in public health and education to give everyone a better start in life. And that brings us to our third and final role, stabilization. Here you can think of the government and its central bank as the economy's mechanic. Their job is to keep the engine running smoothly, to stop it from overheating with inflation or stalling out in a recession. This is all about managing the big picture, what we call the macroeconomy. The goal is to smooth out the natural boom and bust cycles of the economy, preventing those painful extremes of crazy high prices on one end and devastating, job-killing recessions on the other. And this is where it gets really smart. The government uses completely opposite tools for opposite problems. If the economy is tanking in a recession, it uses expansionary policies, like cutting taxes or lowering interest rates, to encourage people and businesses to spend more. But if the economy is overheating and inflation is soaring, it does the exact reverse. It uses contractionary policies, like raising taxes or interest rates, to cool things down. So, after looking at all these theories and all these practical jobs, what's the big takeaway? Well, it's that running a modern economy is a constant, incredibly delicate balancing act. And if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's this. In our world today, the debate is no longer about whether the government should have a role. That ship has sailed. The real question, the one every single country is wrestling with every day, is finding that perfect sweet spot between private freedom and public good. Every single one of these roles involves a trade-off. If you push too hard for efficiency, you might end up with more inequality. If you push too hard for fairness, you might slow down economic growth. And those stabilization policies, they can have all sorts of unintended side effects. There is no single, easy right answer, which really just leaves us with one final question to think about. What does the right balance look like to you?